Welcome to episode 10 of Podnutz. I'm calling this episode Mike of the Mike Tech Show and Maintaining Enterprise Networks. Now, many of you probably know Mike already from his podcast at MikeTechShow.com. He's going to be our guest today. We're super happy to have him here. Now, Mike runs the IT department of a large company in which he's dealing with computers and networks and servers all day long. So he's going to give us a little insight into his world and how to deal with that type of job and the things you need to know and the things you need to do and what it's like to be in that world. We talk about that mainly, but we do cover other things that are happening in tech today and some gadgets and tools that you guys might find interesting to use on your own. One quick side note here. As we get into the thick of the podcast, we might be using terms that you're not familiar with if you're not familiar with the industry. If there's anything you don't understand and you feel like you're starting to go blank in the podcast at all, stop the podcast and check out the glossary I put on the homepage of podnutz.com and find the word you didn't understand that you feel like is hanging you up. Get a definition for it so you understand it, and then continue with the podcast. You're going to find you can make it through a lot easier that way. It kind of works like magic. You'll see. Just try it. Now I'm going to play a promo real quick here for Mike's podcast. So listen to this for the next few seconds, and then be sure to check out his show at MikeTechShow.com. I think you're going to find a lot of cool stuff there.
Hi, I'm Mike Smith, host of the Mike Tech Show podcast, a weekly technology and computer podcast discussing cool sites, software, tips, and tricks that will make you more productive at home and work. Visit www.miketechshow.com.
So there you go. Give Mike's show a listen and subscribe if you haven't subscribed to his show already. Now, I just want to announce that on Podnutz.com, if you look on the front page of the website, I opened up Podnutz Forums, which is a place I'm going to try to build an environment there where you guys listening, if you have any questions, you can ask them there, and hopefully other members of the forum will be there to answer them. And so go ahead and join. It's free. It's going to be a great community, and we're all going to learn from each other there. So the more people in there, the merrier. So just go nuts. Lastly, before we start, I just want to say that we're on Twitter as Podnutz, so check us out there. We don't list stupid things like I'm sitting in my chair right now or things like that. Basically, what I like to do is announce to people following us what's going on with the podcast and anything of interest that we're doing that I think would be of interest to you guys. Okay, enough talk about that. Let's just get right into the interview here. I'm here with Mike from Mike Tech Show. So how you doing, Mike?
Oh, doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm very glad to join you here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Can't wait to get into some nitty-gritty stuff here.
Yeah, and I'm glad we had the time because we're both in the same area, so we're following the same sports schedule and and everything happening in the area. With I'm a big Flyers and Phillies fan, so I'm glad we were able to find time to hook up.
Yeah, well, the Flyers gave us a break last night and let us have one day of rest today.
Yes, and I want to give some shout outs to the listeners because a lot of listeners of the Mike Tech Show have been supporting and following your podcast. I want to congratulate you on starting out this tech podcast that you're doing, Podnutz. And that's how I actually learned about your podcast. And that's why when you asked me to join, I was like, absolutely, because we already are starting to have a common listener base. And I was really glad to support and help, your show get a foothold and take off. So I'm really glad.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And likewise, too. My listeners told me to listen to your show. And I think that's how a lot of podcasts get listened to. The listener bases talk to the listener bases, and that gets to the hosts, and then everybody listens to each other's stuff. So, yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. And anything that I can do, and it's a great the podcast community, and especially the tech podcast. It is a close community that we look to help each other, and that's how you grow, and that's how I started growing when I started my podcast 3 years ago. It's been a little over 3 years, and everybody supported each other and helped each other because there's always room for another good tech podcast, and it's great because everybody brings something a little different to the table.
Right.
That little take on tech that is unique to you, and that the listener gets that advantage of hearing that, and I think that's awesome.
I agree. There's no, I think there's also not a lot of, not enough stuff out there yet. So
there is.
The more the merrier. I could listen to tech podcasts all day. In fact, I'm one step away from getting rid of my cable box. The only reason I'm keeping it is to watch the Philly sports.
Yeah.
But other than that, I just turn on my Apple TV and watch all the podcasts and listen to all the podcasts. I mean, it's entertainment. It's entertainment for a geek.
Ooh, I have a question since you mentioned the Apple TV. Yes. I am thinking about that. Can you just have any movie that you've downloaded, put it into iTunes, even if you didn't buy it from Apple, and will that then be available through your Apple TV on your TV?
If iTunes can play it, then the Apple TV can play it. I'm not sure if you get a movie that's in a certain format. You know what? I'm actually not quite sure what formats you could throw into iTunes exactly.
Okay, but you may have to convert it to the iTunes format and then add it to the library. I guess what I'm asking is you can add external movies to the library that are not purchased from Apple.
That's right. If it's in your iTunes library, the Apple TV will play it.
Okay. And so that's going to be the challenge then, getting it to the Apple format to get it into the iTunes library.
You know, it may be a challenge, it may not. I've heard, just like in passing, like you could put DivX into the iTunes directory, I think with not too many problems. But got to check on that.
All right. No, that's great because that's something that I'm looking into. I see the Apple TV, and it looks like a pretty cool device that can fit into my entertainment system. And since I'm now using iTunes a lot, and now we're starting to grow the Macs here. Yeah. I don't want to scare everybody who is a listener of my show that's tuning into this. I'm not going to become a Mac guy and an Apple guy, but there's a place in the world for all of them.
Right.
And I use the Windows system predominantly, but the Mac does a nice thing, and they got some nice products, and they do what they do, and they're a great tool to use, you know, for what they bring to the table for like video editing and some things that I need the Mac for.
Sure, and if you wanted something, I mean, it's not terribly cheap. It's like $220 for the 40 gig, and like I think $299 for 120 gig. But you could you don't even need the hard drive space if you're streaming right from iTunes. I mean, you could stream it from any computer. But the main thing it does really nice is if you have an HD TV, it allows you to watch like your HD podcasts like right through the Apple TV and on your HD TV with like no problem. You don't have to worry about resolutions. You don't have to worry about sizing your screen properly. Like some media center PCs, when you hook them up to an HD TV, they're a little funky because you're going through a VGA port into an HD TV, and